Welcome to GYDA Initiative Talks. This week we are with Alex Langshur. Alex is founder and co-CEO of Cardinal Path, an award-winning consultancy that leverages data and advanced analytics. He works closely with Google, including being instrumental in the creation of the Google Partners Elevator program. Alex is a keynote speaker, writer and tutor of digital marketing optimization. In this podcast, he shares his knowledge of the digital agency world.
Hello and welcome to the GYDA Initiative Grow Your Digital Agency Initiative podcast. Today I am absolutely delighted to have Alex Langshur with me. Alex Langshur from Cardinal Path. Alex Langshur, who has grown an agency. Alex Langshur, who's showing agencies how to grow. Welcome, Alex.
Robert, I think the right word is you'd say you're chuffed to meet me, right? Or to be
chuffed,
here with
we use
chuffed.
The word chuffed is we're absolutely spiffing and chuffed on this side of the Atlantic to meet you. So, Alex, can you just give us a little bit of a background on how you've ended up where you are, which I think is a really exciting place?
Well, the background for people that haven't heard this is that I've got a couple of degrees in science and actually in earth sciences, and I was a geologist for many years looking for gold in northern Canada, which has absolutely nothing to do with running a digital organization consultancy at all. But I was fortunate enough to work both in the non-governmental and the governmental sector as well, which is all part of the backstory. But how I got to here was it was like I think it was early 2000s, and I had been recently in the United States. And early 2000s was a period when the .com bomb just kind of exploded. And at the time, I'd been working as a VP of client services for an IT tech consulting firm. And it was remarkable to watch that over the course of about 5 months, that thing just imploded. And I had clients calling me up and saying, if you don't fax me my invoice, by the end of the day, you won't get paid because I'm being walked out the door. And so that whole entity just cratered within a very short space of time. And I found myself, after having a significant birthday, without a job. And at the time, it was very hard to get any jobs in tech, certainly in the United States and in Boston, where I live. And it was really difficult. It was the first time that I found myself out of work. My wife and I were hoping to have another child. Had a brand new house with a mortgage, and in Boston, that's a lot of money. And when I started to try and look for work, nobody was really interested in hiring people at my age. I found there was a lot of ageism. And the net result of all that was that I got, pretty depressed. And after a few months of wallowing about, my wife said, you've got to go get help, which I did, and started to turn the corner. And I had this realization that I didn't want to ever get laid off again, and I never wanted to get fired again, and I wanted to control my own future. And I decided I was going to hang a shingle out and start doing consulting. So I picked myself up, and in my yet-to-be-born second son's bedroom, I started a business at the time called Public Insight, which I grew over the course of the next 7 years, and merged that with 2 other companies from my co-founders in Cardinal Path to form Cardinal Path in 2011. And we had this crazy dream when we formed the company, which we talked about, because I felt it was important to talk about what our joint vision was and why we were coming together. And the crazy dream was that we would build something of enough value that we'd be able to sell it in 5 years. And so with that as a kind of a somewhat fuzzy North Star, we then proceeded to build the business, and we're very fortunate that we were able to actually sell it to Dentsu 5 years less a week later. So now for the last 4 years, I've been working as CEO of Cardinal Path, the last 2 and a bit years as CEO of Cardinal Path, and within Dentsu. That's the backstory.
It's a great story. So you've got so our main audience here are digital agencies, owner founders of digital agencies.
Yeah.
Either they're in that early stage where they're like 1 to 5 people and saying, buy from me,
Yeah.
I'm cheerful. All the way through to 250, 300, 250 people agencies going, well, we think we might have a deal. The deal might come up. We're struggling. We're on our second round and so on. Those are the people who are our audience here. So I guess there's 2 stories here. The one is the exit, the sale one, and I think the other one, which is the agenda for today, really, is you spend a lot of time helping agencies. You spend a lot of time working with agencies, showing agencies how to grow.
Yeah.
I know there's no magic silver bullet. I know there's no simple solution, but you've got some principles that you like to show, and you've got some principles that you applied in Cardinal Path, I guess. So it works.
Yeah.
Presumably you apply those when you're helping and working with agencies. I'd love to know more about those.
Yeah, well, Robert, so it's true. There's a couple of points that I just want to touch on before I begin. And the first one is that, I know what it's like to be a 1-person agency because I was it. And I know what it's like to be a 2-person agency and make that very first hire because I did that. And I know what it's like to be a 5-person agency. And now you've got like a little bit of salary mass that you've got to make every month, and you probably now need to get a bigger office and sign a lease for several years, and that's a scary thing. And I know what it's like to be a 20-person agency where you're bigger and the risks are bigger, but you're not quite at the point where you have somebody that you can fully say that's an internalized job that you're not going to bill against because you're concerned about every dollar going out the door. And I know what it's like to be 100+ size consultancy because I've lived that entire growth curve, and it is each one of those requires slightly different approaches to managing, and the experience of having gone through that was really formative for me. Like I had to learn everything really in the school of hard knocks because, as I mentioned earlier on, my background is absolutely not in business, it's in science. But I've had a lot of opportunity to read books and learn and try these things out. And what I'm really passionate about in a major way is transformational change, like helping organizations, consultancies, agencies, be able to apply some pretty well understood principles and to understand that, going back to Marshall Goldsmith, what got them there won't get them to where they want to go, and make that transformational change. And so if you ask me what my passion is, other than, building and managing and growing a vibrant consultancy that delivers value to clients and creates the opportunity for employees to live the life they want, and have the challenges that keep them stimulated, is to help agencies, shorten that growth curve and kind of go through one of the Griner curve stages a little bit more quickly. And so, but it's hard. It's really, really hard because, you're fearful to take on new approaches when what you're doing is kind of sort of working for you. And it's hard because, generally speaking, it falls on you to do, and you've got already so many things to do. So, I really get that. And so when I'm doing my coaching, right, which I do a lot of coaching for Google on behalf of their Elevator program, and I've done this around the world for Google. I know you have, but it's given me the opportunity to really think through a lot of stuff. One of the things that I've come to understand is that when you listen to people talk about how they've been successful at building their business, they often give a lot of these bromides. And I'm not a big fan of the bromide.
We worked hard.
That's right, exactly.
110%.
Work hard.
110%.
Never give up. And I really dislike those bromides because I don't think I've ever met an agency head that doesn't work crazy amounts of hard, who doesn't believe in teamwork, who doesn't put their heart and soul into what they're doing. So
and more interestingly,
Yep.
if you talk to the businesses that fail, and you say, what was your secret magic formula? It was work hard, get up early, have a great strategy. It's like, so why have you done? Could you just roll back a little bit? Because you mentioned one word which I find is my not my secret word, but quite the reverse. A word that we might need to talk about a bit more. You said Griner. You said the Griner growth curve. Now, not everyone knows what the Griner growth curve is, and for me, it's a really important fundamental piece in the how can I help agencies to grow. So, could you just talk about Griner a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, professor at the Harvard Business School in the 60s, 70s, and it just had this very elegant, simple thought, which was, if we take a look at all businesses, can we identify commonalities between them at different stages of their growth? And if we can, what are they? And if we know what those are, can we anticipate them so that we're able to plan for them, and thus we can avoid them actually causing us to get derailed? Simple, super elegant idea. And the actuality is that he came up with 6 stages of growth. And the curve is not actually a curve in his case, for all of you. This is size of the organization, and this is age of the organization along the x-axis, and he's got a straight line. But going from stage to stage really indicates that requires that you go through some crisis. And the crisis is actually a really good thing because it forces the organization to think about how they're operating and to adjust their principles accordingly. And the fascinating thing is that, I do a lot of coaching, and I throw the Greiner curve up there and I say, this is what he came up with in 72. How many of you are at this stage? And a bunch of hands go up in this stage. Then I say, fundamentally, does this mirror where you are? And I've never had anybody say, that does not reflect my reality at all. So the Greiner curve, to me, is an amazing tool because it can predict the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I always describe it as it's like baby, toddler, infant, child, and the rattling as you try and get from one stage to the other because your feet are too big, but you think you can walk, but you can't walk, and you can't see properly, and you just see it all the time. Agencies are struggling at 13, 14, 15, 13, 14, 15, 13, 14, 15, 16, 13, 14, 15, because that's one of the first big ones is around about 15 people where they suddenly start hiring non-fee earners. They suddenly start having more systems and processes. They suddenly start sort of not taking any piece of work. And that's calm down now.
Well, look, Robert, I love you. I've always super enjoyed every one of our talks because you are like, I think I bow before your ability to create metaphors, and like the baby rattling is perfect. And I'm going to steal that, by the way. So, but so the Greiner curve is I think a very useful curve. There's another one that was Lewis and Churchill that did one that came out about 1983, I think it was, which I think is a more realistic. They have fewer phases. The curve is actually a curve, and it reflects a little bit more of the reality of how, when you hit that inflection point and you start to grow, it isn't linear. It's a real kind of growth curve, and that has its own challenges as well. But I would encourage anybody that's listening and watching this to check those two curves out, because they can actually be very predictive. In fact, they're very predictive.
So you've gone from redundancy, depression. You said the word lightly, but you definitely mentioned that word, depression.
Yep.
I'm going to run myself a business. I'm never going to let someone sack me ever again.
Yeah.
We're going to grow a business in 5 years' time and sell it. And you sold it within you started the sale process within 1 week of that 5-year thing. I mean, that's amazing stuff.
Very
big pat
fortunate.
on the back. I mean, big pat on the back. I mean, we do. I know we beat ourselves up, but I mean, that's an amazing story.
Well, first of all, hand on heart, thank you. I appreciate that. I want to say that there was a lot of hard work in that, obviously, but I also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of luck. And it's as I said, when I was a geologist, there's a lot of good geologists, but very few find a mine. So I'd much rather be a lucky geologist than a good geologist, because lucky geologists find mines. And I still think that's true today, is that you do everything that you can to put yourself in a position to win, but then there's luck, and that's an intangible, and I won't deny the fact that I had, one of the big lucky things that happened for me was I always have invested in my network. I've always felt it's really, really important. It's one of the most important things that you can do is to invest in your network. And as a result of that, that's how I met my partners. And but I was lucky that they were the right partners because I've had other partners who weren't the right partners, and that was unlucky. So
where the emphasis is on parting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got sort of 5. They're not bromides, I guess. They're principles that you.
Yeah. So, look, here's the thing. When I do my coaching, I try and weave a narrative arc, and my purpose is to drive transformational change. And my KPI is that when people leave one of my coaching sessions, they are beyond excited to apply at least 1 or 2 of the things that we've gone over, because they see the immediate value it's going to deliver to their business. Now, just to be clear, if you were to say, Alex, tactically, what should I be focusing on? There's no surprises there. You need to focus on your marketing. You need to focus on your finances. You need to focus on your operations. Operations are different from delivery. You need to focus on your delivery. You need to understand what your strategy is and have a good strategy in place. You need to make sure that you're looking towards your partnerships and investing in those partnerships. And then finally, you need to be investing in yourself to make sure that you're managing yourself well and that you've got the right team on the field. So, those are, I think anybody pretty much knows that, those are the kind of functional tactical areas that you need to go down in and work on each one of them. But if I go to the point about managing yourself and the principles, those are the ones that I want to just take a few minutes with our listeners today and talk about. And because they go through each one of those functional areas. And I'd start for the first one is I either win or I learn. And it's not from me. It's I want to remember the name of the person who came up with it, but it's escaping me at the moment. But the thing is that I have never lost. I've never lost because I learn.
Okay.
And the thing is if we are not successful in securing a client, if we have a situation where things don't turn out the way that I want them to, then it's incumbent upon me as a student of getting better, as a commitment to operational excellence and improvement, is to take a very hard look at what happened and take what the gift is, right? So life throws you all kinds of curveballs. Business is not always easy. And my perspective on it is that every time something doesn't turn out the way that I want it to, my job as an adult and as a leader is to figure out what the gift of this is and to not lose the gift.
Yeah.
Never lose the gift. And that can be on anything. You lose one of your most important employees. Well, the gift there is, it means that you're going to learn why they left. You're going to understand what you need to do to replace them. You're going to have a strategy to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. You're going to be thinking, it's going to be all kinds of things that are coming out of that. That's a gift. And the thing is, we often forget to unwrap the gift. No, I'm serious. I'm absolutely serious. Like we take the hurt, right? We don't take the opportunity to learn, right? So we take the hurt, but we don't take the gift that comes within that hurt. And it's really important that you can get beyond yourself to get to that gift, because that's where the true, I think, personal learning happens. And so, you win, and in which case it's all, smiles and happiness, where you're going to learn. And I apply that to everything. And I also apply it to personal life as well. So that's my first thing. And so what I'd say to people that come to my coaching sessions and that I coach, let's look at the hard issues that you're facing, particularly the ones that you're unhappy with, and let's learn. And that could be across any function.
So what you're talking about there, just to be clear, is something comes in, another example from you would be great, but what you're talking about is something comes in, it doesn't go your way, and rather than going, shoot, bloody clients, bloody staff, you actually spin that round, get a sense of of what you need to take from it for yourself? Create a process, create a system.
Yeah. So let's give you a real.
My point is, it's not just touchy feely, positive woo woo stuff. It's actually concretely digging out and learning.
Abso-freaking-lutely.
Okay.
Right.
Good.
So I'll give you a hard example of that.
Great.
We put in a bid for a major multinational luxury brand, which we lost, and we spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on this. And so I requested and received a debrief. And I started off by saying, my goal here is not to change your opinion. I really want to understand and learn. And I'm going to ask you a lot of pointed questions. I'm looking for you to be the Simon Cowell in this conversation with me. I need the honesty, because I'm not going to improve if I don't get your honesty. So help me learn. And so those are kind of the going in statements. And a couple of things that came out of that. One was, we were told that we won on technical, but we lost on vision and we lost on price. So we lost on vision. And the thing that really bothered me about that was that I thought we had done a good job at vision, but reality was that we had done a lousy job at vision, because we hadn't told the narrative and we hadn't told the story. What we had said is, we have all these laundry list of services and they would fit together like this. But what happened was the winning organization actually pitched this whole entire story arc and explained, we have all these services. Let me show you how they fit together as a capability stack. Let me show you case studies of how this capability stack is enabling these clients to win. And what I realized was I was talking about the feet, the head, the tails, but I wasn't talking about the freaking elephant. Exactly. And so it completely changed the way that I viewed story, and how story is super important. And in fact, the irony is, of course, I now work for a creative agency, Dentsu, which is all about story. But in a competitive environment, it's not just about your capabilities that you can deliver. It's also about the story that you put around them. And then we really had to be able to deliver on that story. So then it became a question of, well, is the reason why we're not talking about this in a narrative format because, in fact, the organization, Cardinal Path, is not structured to deliver as a capability set, but is structured to deliver as projects. And in fact, that's what we discovered, is that the technical implementation team kind of said, okay, technical implementation done like this. And our analysis and insights team, if they come in, they're like, where's the data? They were disconnected from the data side. And so they never even were talking about the data side, what was going upstream from them, but they also weren't talking what was downstream from them, which was a lot of the data side. So we had a disjointed series of services. So that was a wonderful opportunity. And the last thing I'll say on that is we lost on price. Now, we lost on price to a well-known multinational firm that has, offices and gleaming towers around the world in high-cost countries, very deep carpet country organizations. And what I was told was that the range that we gave them, that the company that won, was well below the low end of our range. So we gave a range because it was very complicated. Right? So they were well below that. And I couldn't understand how that is. How can that be? And then I realized is that there's this little thing called offshoring. And I realized that, fundamentally our cost structures need to be looked at, because if we're going to swim with the big whales, we're going to need now to start understanding how we can manage our overall cost structures. And you either manage that through improvement in efficiencies, you manage that through looking at where your labor is located around the world, or you look at that by saying we're not going to play that game and we're going to play like a high quality, high delivery, high touch game. So we've been taking all of those lessons.
Brilliant, love it. Okay, that's one. Number two.
Right. So, I'd say that every Lennon needs their McCartney, right? Every Thelma needs her Louise. Every Hewlett needs his Packard. Every we could go on. Every Jobs needs their Wozniak. Every Gates needs their Allen. It's rife. Business is rife with this. It's the idea of the lone individual going out there and building an empire is it's very, very complicated right now. I mean, the ad tech industry and space is getting extraordinarily complicated. The digital marketing space is just getting incredibly difficult right now. If you're entering this business or you're building this business, you need the kind of smartest people on your team possible. And what I found personally is that I am better when I'm with somebody else. And so I have co-founders. And the thing that's most important about that co-founders was that it relieved a tremendous amount of psychic load from me, because when you're solo, there's a lot of psychic load on you, and all the decisions ladder up to you, and it's very, very draining. When you've got a partner or partners, and they've got the same vision as you, and you've got good, and I mean good legal agreements between the partners, you've seen the proper attorneys to make sure that the council has drawn up the proper partnership agreements, and that's sidebar, super freaking important. If you get that, then you're just going to go farther faster. It's just a fact. And so whether that's at a founding level or whether that's an executive team level, whatever it is, it's the principle is that I have found that finding those right people, forging those right bonds, was absolutely critical and key to whatever success that I've had in business in the last 15 years. And so I just think that 1 + 1 = 6, 7, 8, 9. It's a multiple that's well beyond just a multiple of 2. And I think the data is pretty conclusive on this too.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's this EO system where they talk about the visionary and the instigator. And as I look at agencies we work with, so often there's one of the co-founders who's out there, extrovert, cutting deals, looking after sales, looking after strategy, dreaming about the future. And there's an instigator or implementer who's someone who just makes the stuff happen, because you just can't do it all on your own. You can't be, and they're entirely different sides of the brain. There are entirely different ways of making stuff happen. But the Lennon and McCartney thing is more than two. It's about the partnership. It's about the bounce. It's about seeing things different. Every Lennon needs a McCartney. I'm going to steal that one.
well, if we just keep going a little bit further about that, look, there's been many an occasion which my worst instincts were put in check by my partners, and vice versa. There's many situations where there was a really tough decision that we had to make, and I was just so thankful that I was making this decision. I enjoy making tough decisions. That's what if a decision comes to me, it's because it's a difficult decision, right? I just kind of ipso facto, they're going to be tough decisions when they get to where I am. But having the ability to debate these in a really transparent way and in a supportive, and I would even say loving way with your business partners leads to I just think it leads to a better outcome.
Love it. So 1, 2, 3.
So one of the things that I'll share with you is that I don't know anybody other than sociopaths who really like conflict. No, it's true. It's true. Most people don't like conflict, right?
You haven't met my wife, have you?
No, I haven't. No, but this is being recorded, Robert. And I think she's the editor, right? So
I'm joking. Of course, I'm joking. It was just put on a plate. So it's like,
yes, I understand. It was an easy softball, as we'd say here. But the point being is that we don't like conflict. And I will tell you myself that I'm not a fan of conflict. But what I will also tell you is that if you aren't prepared to steer into conflict, you're just not going to be as successful. And the thing which I would say to you is that as a huge believer in meditation and mindfulness that I used to always say to people, steer into conflict. But now I say smile, then steer into conflict. And the reason I say that is because if you're going for bear, if you're like, Jon Snow, and you're like in front of the opposing army, and you're going in for battle, and you draw your sword and you just rush into it, you'll be taking a lot of anger into that. And I've generally found, I'll come to this in another point about emotion in business, but I don't think anger is a very productive business emotion. And I think that if you smile, you're able to depersonalize the conflict and look at it for what it is. And if you're able to do that, then you're able to have a much better conversation, because you're kind of cutting yourself off from a lot of the triggers that set us off and create these tit for tat conversations, which often reflect conflict. Because the ultimate goal of steering into conflict for me is to resolve it. Yeah. And the way I like to resolve conflict, whether it's with staff, whether it's between staff, whether it's with a client, whether it's in any format, is that I want to put myself in the other person's shoes, and I want to let them know that I'm coming at this from a very principled perspective, but I'm absolutely unafraid to say what needs to be said, but I'm going to do so with a smile, because I'm not here to hurt you, and I'm not here to actually perpetuate the conflict. What I'm really trying to do is to solve it, but I'm not going to put up with bad behavior. Just not. I'm not going to put up. I will say, and have said, look, I hear what you're saying. I understand it, and I want to agree with you, but I have to disagree. And here's why. And so, it's being ready for that conflict, and you're going to have to get comfortable with conflict, because if you don't, you're going to find yourself in situations that you don't want to be in.
Yeah.
And if you, I this is something my brother tells me all the time. If you argue with the universe, generally speaking, you're going to lose, right? So if you rail against the forces that are, that's a useless use of your time. As a business leader, you've got to remain focused. As a business leader, you've got to project that sense of leadership that staff want. And a part of that is being the guy that's ready to go into battle, but do so in a way that lets them know that it's okay to talk about these things, and to do that in a respectful way, so that your team sees you representing them. And so conflict can be really productive, but it has to be managed well.
I love that. I've just written a letter. They may be watching right now, and I used what I think it used to be called the Harvard case study method, which is what's the background, what's the situation, what's the problem, possible solutions, recommendation. And it was a way, basically I was saying, you're trying to screw me over, and contractually this doesn't work. But actually having some kind of a tool to go in, and everything I hear from you, there's lots of Stephen Covey.
Yeah.
Start with the end in mind, seek first to understand.
Yes, correct.
And also there's a lovely book, Radical Candor.
Yeah.
About, and it is easier if you're honest. It's easier if I would argue, if everything's out in the open, because 1 + 1 = 3, because there is this stuff you got to deal with.
Yeah, but the key thing which I'm trying to get to though here is this aspect of smile, then steer into it. And the reason why I say smile is because your physicality and your mentality are intimately connected. And the data is unequivocal around that. And if you want to read about it, Kahneman in Thinking Fast and Slow talks about it at length. But the reality is that if you smile, what you're basically doing is, it's the same thing as breathing deeply beforehand, is that it enables you to get in control. And enables you to say, I'm not going to take the bait. I'm not going to allow myself to get triggered. I'm going to try and remain as clear-headed as I can about this. I am not here to perpetuate the conflict. I'm here to just talk about what's obviously on the table. And because I'm prepared to do so, actually you have power.
Yeah.
Because when you are that person that is unafraid to do so, if the other person, because we all shy away from it, is afraid, then at that point you have power. And here's where it becomes really like mental jiu-jitsu. That's where you give them, you make it very clear, this isn't about power for you. You're really just interested in solving this.
Nice. So win, learn. Lennon has his McCartney. Smile.
Then steer into conflict.
Steer into conflict. Love that. What's number 4 on your list?
So this builds on the last. Remember, I said sidebar. I'll talk about emotions in a sec. My brother, who's my best friend and kind of my business mentor as well, and I were having this conversation at one point, and he said to me, if it's emotionally satisfying, it's bad for business, something along those lines. And I've kind of modified it to say, if it feels emotionally satisfying, it's probably bad for business. And so that's the classic where you get angry and you say something and you feel good at the moment in saying it. But once you ding that bell, it's extraordinarily hard to unding the bell. And it's always a small industry. And I feel very, very much that if you let go of your emotions, and particularly towards anger or frustration, whether it's with staff or with clients or with partners or with whatever, it generally doesn't lead to better business outcomes. That's really not something that I try to do. Now, it doesn't mean that I can't be emotionally invested in what I'm doing. It doesn't mean that I don't work really hard and get wrapped up in trying to win or trying to push something forward. But when you're in an interpersonal dynamic, if you allow your emotions to get the better of it, it's probably not going to be good for business. So, and that has, I think I've listened to that advice all about really 2 times in my life. And the most recently about 6 months ago when I was particularly annoyed with a situation, which, the irony is that I kind of regret it now, because when you go to that point, what happens is people just label you. They put a label on you and they say, okay, he's like that, that's it. And so they've lost the message too. They've lost the opportunity to learn.
Good. Number 5.
Number 5 is that is kind of my most bromide-ish thing of all. But here's the thing, right? I said earlier on that I'd rather be a lucky geologist than a good geologist. And the reason why is because everybody's a good geologist, but it's the lucky ones that find mines. And so the reality is that there are many, many times when I thought, I can't do this anymore. There are many times when I was just really tired. There's so many times when I thought I was on the brink of success and the precipice of disaster. I mean, it was just like, and this up and down is emotionally just completely draining. We won that client, we lost that. It's just super emotionally draining. That person left. Oh, that person we hired. Yay. It's just like, it's very emotionally draining. And so you have to kind of set a game plan. And then you have to follow that game plan. So what I say is persistent effort, consistently applied, yields results. So if you trust in your strategy, if you trust in your executional tactics, if you make yourself open to take the gift of learning when things don't go the way that you thought they might go, then you will get results. They might not be the results that you want the first time, but through that kind of commitment to learning, they will be the results that you want eventually. And it's important to keep that in mind, because if you look at, I think, you said earlier on that successful businesses and unsuccessful businesses, look at the ones that were unsuccessful, and they were probably doing a lot of the same things. They were probably working really hard, staying up really late, giving it all they got. That's the luck factor to a certain degree, or maybe it's a bad business plan. But what I can tell you is that it's the steady accumulation over time that gets you to where you want to be. And so it's always a marathon. It's never a sprint. And that means that, if you find yourself sprinting all the time, you're not going to make it to the finish line. So it really has to be, you're looking at everything. You're saying, okay, operations, what are the key things I need to focus on from an operations perspective that's going to deliver the most value, and work on that? What are the key things I need to look on from delivery? Why is our delivery working? What's not working? Focus on that. But it's like incremental change consistently applied will yield those results. And if you instill that kind of mentality on your team, then it becomes one, I think, that's really unstoppable, because now everybody else is thinking about the same thing. All right, here's our game plan. Here's what we want to do. We're going to be committed to the practice of learning and taking, never losing the gift. And we're going to consistently apply those learnings. And I would say to you that Cardinal Path, we basically did that. I think what really made the fundamental. So in 2013, we made a decision. 2012, actually, we made a decision to buy an ERP software, and we were at the time between 30 and 50 people. I can't remember. Turnover or revenue was maybe around $6 million at the time, and we spent stupid amounts of money buying an ERP system, because our plan was, we knew that we needed to have the systems in place that would go from first client contact right through to time management, resource planning, project management, invoicing, financials, and accountability, right out. We wanted to have that entire end-to-end visibility, because we knew if we had that system in place, then we would have all of the data available for us to incrementally work on the different parts of the business. And so we made that decision, and it took a year to actually get that thing fully working. Could not run the business today without it. It is the secret sauce for Cardinal Path.
Okay,
because
so nearly all the conversations I've been having for the last 2 weeks have been with 30, 50 person agencies going, there's got to be a way that where we aren't literally manually taking information from a CRM system and putting it into project management, well, maybe that'll talk to the resource management, and maybe that'll talk to the invoicing, and maybe that'll talk, but no one can find a less expensive way of getting end-to-end transparency of the process. It's driving everyone mad, and you feel that there must be something out there. And what you're saying is you went down the ERP route, and a year and a lot of money, I dare say, to get that piece in place.
Yeah, it was about 10% of revenue. Exactly. And installation over time. So that problem which you described, right? So what do we sell as consultancy/agencies? We sell our factor production is an hour. It's a unit of time.
Yep.
And so if that's the factor production, then you need to monitor time. That's your inventory. What's your inventory? It's hours. How is that inventory tied to? It's tied to people and their levels. An entry-level consultant will have more hours than, let's say, a director or a group director that they're required to deliver on a yearly basis. So your factor production is an hour. Your inventory are the number of hours that you have per people. You deliver those hours against what? Against clients, which you have to go and find. So you need an RP. You need to understand what the bank of hours is relative to the stage of progress of that opportunity as it comes down the pipeline. If you're selling services across the world, as Cardinal Path is, you've got all kinds of taxation issues. So you're going to need to have invoicing and financial capability to invoice around the world and to manage that in such a way that you don't get it wrong. Because if you get it wrong, you're now subject to penalties and fines. You need to be, all of that stuff. So remember, going back to what I said earlier on about partnership, it's an incredibly complicated business environment today from what you're delivering. So the operational systems are actually quite complicated too. And you have to be really consistent at working on the operational side. You know, we go to our clients and we say to our clients, if you want to have unique conversations that are engaging with clients, and to do that at scale, so personalized, engaged conversations at scale, it's impossible to do that without an ad tech, martech system. Can't do it. If you want to find those people, can't do it. You need to have that. If you want to compete in the 21st century, you need that martech, that ad tech. Simple. If if you don't have it, you're not serious. And I would submit to you that if your intention is to grow beyond 50 people, you can't do that with tribal approaches. You actually need to have a system. It won't scale. And when it doesn't scale, when you find out that it doesn't scale, that's an unpleasant moment, because now it's really expensive to implement that. So, yeah.
So when's the best time? 30 to 50 people?
Yeah, so that would be about the right time to do it. And the reason why is because it's too expensive. You can operate with the kind of the lower cost model approaches when you're smaller. But at some point in time, you reach a point where you can actually hire somebody to manage your operations. And when you get that person whose role it is to look at operations, right? That person becomes responsible for your CRM. That person becomes responsible for your ERP. And operations also includes resourcing and resource management. And that, let me tell you, Robert, is the absolute secret sauce of a consultancy, resource management. So you can't do that without a tool. Just can't.
Wow. Well, we're kind of coming to an end, I'm afraid, which is the real shame. Yeah. I know that whenever you and I get going, it feels like there should be hours and hours of conversation. And so much food for thought. I guess what I'd like from you, I know it's, and I don't want it to be pithy, but it is, and it is kind of a pithy, stupid question in a way. But
let's hear it.
Well, if you were talking to your self now, and you were 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 staff, you were in that kind of that young, relatively young agency. Remember, a lot of people are happy at that young thing, and you were serious about the growth exit piece, because I think that's what really is you about, but let's assume you say, okay, I want to exit in 5 years. I mean, what's kind of on the to-do list to actually take your agency from being, hey, wow, suddenly we're 30 people, we're doing really nicely, we're doing really nice work, to creating something that's of value and sellable?
So the super simple answer there. So I did a podcast for Google Partners, and I used to be the host of that. And one that I did with Tom Crowley, who was the banker that we hired to sell Cardinal Path. And one of the things that we talk about in that podcast is 20 on the top and 20 on the bottom. So 20% revenue growth year over year, 20% PBIT or EBITDA or whatever you want to call it on the bottom line. And if you don't have those numbers, it's going to be much, much harder for anybody to kind of take a serious look at you. But if you've got those numbers, then you've got those numbers not for 1 year, not for 2 years, but for 3 years, because two points always make a straight line. You need to have 3 points at the minimum. And if you've got those 3 years in the bank, you are a candidate. Like, you're doing the things that you need to do to be a candidate for sale. 20 on the top, year-over-year growth. 20 on the bottom. 20 on the top can be really hard, right? It can be really hard. But 20 on the bottom, there's a lot of things you can do to get that. And so start there. Like, really think about what it takes to have a business at a 20% margin and have all the financials that back that up, right? That's the other thing, is I find a lot of agencies, they actually don't know what their true margin is, right? There's kind of, they're not as rigorous on their bookkeeping as they should be on their accounting.
You're talking about 20% growth in the top line and 20% net profit, or 20%, just to be clear, or 20% growth in EBITDA?
20% margin.
20% margin.
Right. Yeah. So if your margin's less than 20%, you're not really converting a lot of your revenue to profits. And, it's really about the profits. That's what people are going to value the business on. They might value it on the revenue, but it's hard. It's really about the margin. And if you can push that margin to 30%, 40%, you're going to get a better multiple. Mm-hmm. So if I was to say anything to anybody that's thinking about, hey, I'd like to do an exit, then you steer your business towards, at the very least, 20% year over year on the bottom line, because you have a lot of controls over that, right? There's a lot of cost controls you can play on that, and push for 20 on the top line. It's excusable to not quite get to 20, 18 and a half, 18, nobody will quibble, but get that 20 on the bottom.
I love that. We could talk for hours, but we can't. It's been absolutely great. 5 golden, they're not rules, they're not bromides, they're kind of DNA pieces, aren't they, that kind of run through the business. We're going to talk again about exit, but not today. Alex, thank you incredibly for sharing so generously. Thank you for being you, actually, as well. And at the end of the video, people can see your URL and contact details and so on and so forth. So one final big thank you to you, Alex. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't throw the love right back at you, Robert, for everybody listening on this. Years ago, I put together a big coaching program for Google, and I invited Robert to be my coach to make that happen. And I think every coach needs a coach. I consider you to be my coach. And it's been a joy for me to know you these last few years, and gratitude.
Gratitude as well. Brilliant. Thanks a lot, and it's been great. Thank you very much.
Bye, Rob.